Hi, welcome back. Selfies can be described as portraits, and there are billions of pictures of people that vaguely fall into the category of portraiture. I'm going to run through a few photo categories just to let you know what I'm not talking about. With fashion photographs, the subject is the clothes themselves. Beauty photography is about makeup. Then there's glamour and boudoir photography, which is mostly about sex. Then there's wedding and lifestyle photography. Street photography and environmental portraiture get closer to what I'm talking about, but they generally illustrate a wider subject. In this video, I'm focusing on photographs created by a photographer who's working with the subject to communicate something that is intimately revealing personality. A tiny percentage of the portraits that we see achieve this, but they are the ones that actually stay with us over time. The rest become lost within the visual noise that we are bombarded with every day. For me, the most memorable portraits evoke a feeling within me and incorporate 4 essential characteristics. They reveal who the subject is as a person. They suggest what the connection felt like between the photographer and the subject. We start to question what aspect of the photographer's personality motivated them to emphasize a particular attribute. And finally, do they shed light on the human condition as a whole?
They say that the camera never lies, but it can stretch the...
Things like composition, lighting, technical settings, and location are the practical basics that one has to get right before the process begins. And you definitely don't want these things to overshadow the connection that you have with the subject. I'm now going to move this discussion away from the theoretical and into the practical. Let's say that you're somewhere with your camera and just over there is someone who you think is interesting in some way. And then where do you go from there? Already, I think you've missed a step or two. You are sort of arriving at a gunfight with a knife. The ammo that you need is the reason why you are wanting to take the portrait in the first place. If you're just wandering around looking for nice portraits, you can't expect to communicate much beyond the surface information. I'm not saying that you have to have a clear project plan in order to go out and do portraits, but you need to work through what it is that you want to express. Perhaps it's just an exercise that you set for yourself, like, say, capturing a sense of vulnerability or bravery or isolation. Okay, so we'll get back to our scene, and you've seen someone and you feel that you might be able to make a portrait that fits your brief. An interaction with a stranger is obviously different from one in which you know the person. Approaching new people gets easier the more often you practice doing it. Depending on your temperament, you will approach the person in different ways. Extroverts will make connections more easily, but they also might not be as watchful and aware as introverts. The primary attitude that you have to maintain is curiosity. This will keep you on the right path throughout the process. There are usually so many thoughts banging around in one's head, but the more that you're able to keep the connection uncluttered, the easier it'll be to make a meaningful link. One has to immerse oneself in the moment and trust that subconsciously you will recognize when an authentic connection is being made. Sometimes you have to work with the subject to overcome their self-consciousness and allow them to reveal themselves. We all have a facade that we project to the outside world in order to hide our vulnerabilities. some people crawl inside themselves and others put up a safety net of armor that protects them from being revealed. In both cases, the photographer needs to bypass these defenses. Every case is different, but the more you're able to relax, the more likely that the subject will relax. Almost inevitably, a crack in the facade will appear, and this is the moment that you need to capture. I'm now going to take a look at a few images from 3 well-known portrait photographers. I'm hoping that this will illustrate how they have either succeeded or failed in capturing the essence of their subject. Annie Leibovitz's name often comes up when one's talking about great portrait photographers. She has a strong public profile, mainly due to the exposure she's received while working at Rolling Stone and Vogue. Her photographs are immediately eye-catching and they often make powerful statements. Her lighting arrangements are frequently complex and they take on the appearance of a film set. Many of her images make grand statements that are perfect for the pages of magazines. Readers will stop paging and look at these images because they demand attention. The celebrity factor is also a significant aspect of her work. But if you look closely, like say this portrait of Bette Midler, made around the time when she starred in the film The Rose, it's brilliant in a lot of ways. She's combined a number of elements that draw the viewer into the frame. The roses relate to the film title. Bette Midler has been arranged so that she takes on a decadent pose, and the color palette is consistently warm. So for the purposes of a magazine article delving into Midler's role as Janis Joplin, Leibovitz has nailed this picture. But if you analyze this image in terms of what it has to say about Bette Midler the person, then you might have a less enthusiastic response. One doesn't get a sense of who Midler is as a person. Now this photograph of Nicole Kidman is a completely different story. Leibovitz captures a sense of vulnerability. Kidman's legs are bare and she's sitting awkwardly on the bed. She's staring into the camera with a questioning, unsure expression. The bluish lighting in the room is unsettling and adds to the sense of unease. Having said all that, Nicole Kidman is a great actress, so you can't totally trust that this is an authentic image. Actors are taught to project other personalities. So in this case, we don't know if this emotion was Kidman's or it was scripted for Kidman. I also think that Leibovitz has borrowed an aesthetic from Nan Goldin in order to give this image a natural, spontaneous feel. Richard Avedon was another photographer who became a household name because of his magazine work, mainly for Harper's Bazaar and Vogue. He also produced portraits on a grand scale, and they're very much in line with the magazine work that Leibovitz did. This is probably one of his most famous images, Davima with elephants. It's a dramatic picture, but you couldn't call this a portrait. It's Avedon crossing over into fashion. Essentially, the whole setup is built around the dress made by Dior. These portraits of Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr are for me over-stylized, and they were probably driven by concepts supplied by the magazine. They say very little about these Beatles. In these images, the concept overshadows the person. His famous beekeeper image is also conceptually driven, because graphically the dark bees against the light skin becomes a strong subject all of its own. But the man's defenseless pose and his calm expression completely draw you into the moment, and one immediately relates to this person who's standing in front of Avedon's camera. Now take a look at this image of John Kerry. Avedon has failed completely to break through Kerry's political persona. The image is well lit and reasonably composed, but you can't get beyond the superficial. For many editors, this shot would have been a failure because Marilyn Monroe was usually portrayed as glamorous and star-like. Avedon obviously recognized this unguarded moment as being revealing and went for it. I bet that he would have had to fight to get this portrait into the magazine because they would have probably wanted something more animated. Avedon completely ditches any conceptual devices when he photographs his portraits for his book In the American West. He becomes 100% focused on the essence of the people that he's photographing. In this shot, he maintains the simple studio backdrop, but the viewer's focus immediately goes to the man's body and his face. You get a sense of a life that's been lived hard. This man has taken quite a few physical, mental, and spiritual knocks. His eyes draw you into his inner world of hardship. He's revealing his vulnerability, but at the same time, he's presenting a feeling of strength and resilience. His crooked posture gives us a sense that he's been bent out of shape by the suffering within his life. Alex Soth's portraits are almost all statements about vulnerability and isolation. This obviously says something about him as a person, but throughout his work he's been able to sublimate these emotions. He's obviously finely attuned to recognizing these qualities in his subject. He has to make choices about who he's going to photograph and then within the interaction, how he's going to reveal these characteristics. Overall, you get a sense of loneliness from his portraits. They reflect the fact that we're born, live, and die alone. We may share this space with others, but our capacity to connect is ultimately limited. Soth is challenging the viewer to confront this aspect of human existence. We spend most of our lives running away from this thought, but through our interaction with art, we are able to dip our toe into this deep water. I'm sure Soth has made portraits that fail to reveal a connection. But when I look through the work that he's put out into the world, I struggle to find anything that's failed to make a connection. Did I ever come across this portrait of Soth, and it made me laugh a little because it's kind of the opposite of what he does. It's basically a portrait of a fairly shy looking guy with a beard, a hat, and a camera. Portraiture presents a unique challenge each time one attempts it. There's no formula because every subject is different. Curiosity is the most important tool in one's kit bag. If we are not able to find something that reveals a person's essence, then it's our fault rather than the sitter's. Nobody is truly boring. It's just that we fail to make a connection that reveals their uniqueness. Thanks for staying with me through this video, and please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.